QR code on the screen, so if you would like to ask a question to any of our panellists, please do scan that and pop the question in. While we're waiting for certain questions to come in, can I just ask you to introduce yourself?
Hi everybody, Elaine Billington. I'm the Chief People Officer at National Highways.
Hi everyone, I'm Natalie Penrose. I'm Director of Stakeholder Skills and Inclusion at HS2.
Hi everyone, my name is Nick Jordan and I'm Head of HR Improvement for Great Culture Network Red.
Brilliant. So we have got some great questions coming in. So the first one. So we've obviously just seen with the data, actually we've got lots of people leaving the industry perhaps earlier on, but we need to make sure we've got that pipeline for people to move into those senior leadership roles. So what practical steps can organisations take to build diverse leadership pipelines, and how can they ensure these efforts are sustainable over time? And if I start with Lisa.
Sure. I think doing lots of different things is important. I mean, one of the things that we found has been really helpful is to make the talent management process throughout the whole organisation, not just focusing on the kind of the top end of it. And then the other thing we're looking at is how do we have different interventions for different groups. And that doesn't mean HR sitting in a darkened room trying to wonder what that is. We're running focus groups with our employee networks, with our diverse talent pools to say what would make a difference for you, what are the blockers that you've experienced in your career and what could we do differently. So I think those are definitely a couple of things that we found have really helped, but also being very purposeful about it. So how do we get leaders to really focus their attention on their responsibility and succession planning and having those development conversations to really understand where they need to put their efforts. And target setting can split the audience, I appreciate that, but having clear objectives of what you're trying to achieve and engaging with the data to understand where you've got issues and things that you need to work on, I think is also really important.
Great, thank you. Natalie?
Similar stuff, but I suppose I'd start with a talent management framework that's really clear and consistently applied throughout the organisation so that all of your leaders and managers are using the same framework and taking the same approach. And then I'd go to the data. Once you've got that framework, make sure you use the data that you've got intelligently to understand what your issues are before you start trying to plan your interventions. So our data tells us that we do have an issue at HS2. We do have a lack of senior representation of people from ethnic minority background in particular, but also females. So our data is telling us there's an issue. So when we apply our talent management framework, we look to see that we're being proportionate in those outcomes. We put a lot of training in place for our leaders and managers to make sure that they understand what evidence-based decision making is and that our talent performance outcomes are proportionate and fair. Now, after having understood what our issues were, we did decide we needed to put some more interventions in place, some different interventions. We've got some really well-established leadership and management programmes that a lot of our staff have been through, and they are great. But we decided we needed to do a bit more, having understood what our issues were. And last year, for the first time, we started doing more targeted interventions. So we had a programme for women and a programme for women of colour that were designed to get them ready for that next step and build their confidence and profile in the organisation. And we also did sort of more simple things, but effective things, like exec networking sessions for our top talent. So people from diverse backgrounds that were top talent got to meet our exec on a face-to-face basis, make connections, gain some champions, pick their brains. So for me, I suppose it would be consistent framework, understand how you're assessing talent, use your data to understand your problems, and then target your interventions.
Yeah, thanks, Natalie. And Nick?
Yeah, they're very similar things. So we were looking at our data. We found from our focus groups that our line managers wanted to do the right thing, but didn't really know how. We had policies, we had interventions, we had training, but it never really connected to our people. And what we found quite often was that real work took over. As soon as our teams got under pressure, they stopped all the nice stuff. We've seen something separate, seen something different. So what we've done this year is we started the What It Takes programme, which we took every single line manager through. It's part of their objectives, so they're rewarded and incentivised for doing this. It's part of what we expect, not what we'd like them to do for development. And as part of that What It Takes programme, it goes through inclusive leadership, it goes through our policies, it's how to have these conversations with some knowledge and skill-based programmes as well. And with that, that's made quite a big difference in terms of our leadership and actually being able to do the right thing. It's also allowed us to see the leaders that don't want to do the right thing. They stand out a little bit more now, and we can make, you know, our target interventions there and do what we need to do. So yeah, that's worked pretty well so far.
Brilliant, thank you all so much. And how important do you think senior sponsorship of diverse talent, and that's sponsorship rather than mentoring, so someone senior to speak up for diverse views? Come back to you, Nick.
Yeah, it's been really important for us. I mean, we've had it in the past where we've had sponsors allocated to different roles, but I think what we've changed recently within where I work in Network Rail is we've asked our executive team not just to sponsor a programme or come up with chair meetings, to really be involved and be the face and the voice, and each of our areas sponsor a different network. Again, our employee data and our employee feedback, we're starting to see that's making a difference. They're starting to see that our leaders genuinely do care, and we've all got somewhere to go and speak and have that conversation to raise issues. So for us, it's early days, not doing that new way of sponsoring programmes, starting to make a big difference.
I think when you talk about sponsorship, I think it's important to understand there's different ways of sponsoring in an organisation. So I'd probably just talk through some of the things that we do in different ways. We have a board sponsor and champion of EDI. Our previous one spoke here last year, we gave the keynote, emptied the packet, and having that sort of ownership at the very top of the organisation and visibility on the board is really important. At exec level, that's who our staff see on a more regular basis than the board and may know a little bit more. So we do ask for exec members to sponsor our staff networks. So we've got 8 staff networks, and each of those has got an exec sponsor. So that exec sponsor is the face of that network when it's needed. They work closely with the network to understand the issues and again champion and talk about those issues in the forums that they're in. And last year we tried something new. 2 of our SLT members who are very well respected, step forward actors, diversity champions, helping us with those targeted diverse talent programmes that I talked about, and they were a really valuable source in terms of sponsoring our top talent, but also being challenging about our ideas in the organisation and sort of pushing back and sort of saying that's not going to work and this is why. So I'd say if you're going to use sponsors, you can use them in a variety of different ways. And just going back to your point about the difference between mentoring and sponsorship, that's something that that we've gained better understanding of over the years, that mentoring is important, but sometimes people, it's what they need is a sponsor, someone to really open doors for them, champion them, and help them on that next step in their career.
Thank you. Anything?
Not a huge amount, very, very similar. I think the conversation at the board is always very lively, which is great because we get engagement, and what the board brings is a huge range of experience from lots and lots of different industries, so I never underestimate those sessions and the value you get out of them. And I think the other thing I'd just say as well on the sponsorship bit, we've actually taken time out to educate our executive team on what a sponsor is, because it's not necessarily understood, so don't assume that they understand sponsorship. So we have done programmes where I went on one to say what is a good sponsor, what does a good sponsor look like. And then, as I say, same with yourselves, the employee networks, all the sponsors, and we've got so many now, which is fantastic. We've extended that beyond the exec team, so some of our senior leaders are now sponsoring networks as well, which makes a big difference.
Brilliant, that's great to hear, that's all going on. So, taking a slightly different look, so this question has asked about skills. So, how do we get kind of construction to value leadership skills as much as technical? And this individual said they find that this is potentially a barrier in our pipeline. We're not focusing on that. Any thoughts? Should we start?
Yeah, I was just, as you were talking it through, I was thinking, you're absolutely right. I mean, we employ a lot of engineers, we employ a lot of project managers, and it's that time and focus I think you mentioned about people will very quickly go to what they see as their day job and the core job, and it's getting people to really realise there's a proper balance here. So we do that through lots of different things, but general performance management is not just focusing on what you do, but how you do it and how you go about it. And people often talk about cultures of organisations. For me, that's always been about leadership and behaviours and role modelling and what people spend their time on and where they put the value into their day to day, and it should come very naturally. So I think for us that's really focusing on, yes, your professional sort of core status is really, really important, it's what we value, but as a leader, there's so much more to it, and that's right across the organisation. So that's, I think, something that we do all the time.
Yeah, I recognise that it's a challenge. You know, the same. We have some, you know, highly expert, world-class engineers, etc. in our organisation, but they're not necessarily the most experienced leaders and managers in terms of driving an inclusive culture. So I'd say it's, you know, it's a constant challenge in terms of how you get everyone to the level you want in terms of inclusive leadership. I think some of it is sort of structural and process, and some of it is training and education. So in terms of structure and process, some of the things that we do, everyone has to have an EDI job objective or goal, and we provide a sort of library of goals to the organisation, and they're different for exec, SLT, managers and members of staff, to kind of indicate to our leaders what we expect of them, what the expectations are, whether that's supporting our staff networks, turning up and being visible, or driving behaviour change in their teams. So we do stuff like that in terms of underlining this is part of your job. We expect you to do this. I know your jobs are busy and you're here because you're a technical expert, but this is part of your day job too. So that's a constant drumbeat of reinforcing that message. But you know, there is training to do as well. And last year, just before we went into the end of year performance and talent brand assessments, all of our SLT went on an evidence-based decision-making session, which included messages around allyship and what our expectations were around allyship, and how we expected them to challenge in those difficult end-of-year performance and talent conversations. But I'd say it's the kind of thing, you know, your job is never done. It's that constant reinforcing. This is the organisation's expectations, and this is what we expect of you in your day job.
Not too much more. So, you know, we're doing very, very similar things. I think the other thing I would add on top of that, where we've had a focus, is around our recruitment sort of process, because we were saying, you know, we want to hire leaders, we don't want to hire sort of technical experts, because leaders are really key. But then we looked at our job adverts, we looked at our interview process, and it wasn't really reflecting that. We were asking very technical questions, asking for really technical things. So we've changed that and trying to get that up front so we can choose the right people. And I think on top of that, the other thing we've done that's made a real difference is with our SLG, which is our senior leadership group, the top 100 leaders in our part of the business, is every single session we have now is we have an ED&I training, conversation, call to action within that. So it's part of our agenda, it's part of the core things that we focus on. And actually, it's built a little bit of psychological safety with that group, so people say, look, actually, I don't know what to do here, I don't know what's best, you know, I come from a very technical world, can you help? I've seen that work wonders for our group, and actually starting to move that down a little bit, like people starting to have these conversations and ask for support, which I don't think's happened in the past.
That's great, and that leads really nicely on to the next question. So someone said, you're all big organisations with big EDI budgets. What would your advice be to smaller businesses? Come back to you, Nick.
I think one of the things we found actually, having the average really, having it all separate hasn't really helped us. I think one of the things we found recently is, so I come from a safety culture background, and I think our safety culture had a lot more resource at it, and it's always got competing with our ED&I culture champions and initiatives and things like that. Combining all these efforts into one programme and actually showing our team it's not all these different pots, it's just the workplace, it's just your environment. I think that's really helped us, and you know, for a smaller business that has a smaller budget, being able to link it in with your safety initiatives, with any other initiatives that just focus on the environment and workplace, can really start to combine resource, and a lot of skills, training, the initiatives you put together are very similar. So yeah, there'll be lots of synergies there, and I think you'll be able to get more bang for your buck.
Yeah, I think it's a really fair challenge, and I've sat on these sort of things before and people say, well, it's easy for you now, you know, you've got 2,000 people in there. And it's true, and it is true. But I mean, first thing I'd say, I thought Paul was brilliant in his keynote, and I think that just demonstrates what can be done. even if you're not a big player, you can do fantastic inspirational things. So, go for it for, I'd say is probably my first piece of advice. But yeah, I'd look at what organisations like ours are doing and then think about what can I adapt and make work for me. Best practice doesn't have to be replicated exactly. You can make your version of it, and use people like us just to reach out to, and have a chat. I'm always happy to get on the phone and talk to people about how you could make your response proportionate and cost effective, just learning from the principles that we've got in place, even if you can't replicate that exactly. I think your advice is brilliant, actually. Safety and EDI do go together. A more inclusive workplace is a safer workplace. If people feel able to speak up and say that doesn't look quite right, it will be a safer place to work. And I guess you probably learned that, Paul, and you touched on that in your keynote. So.
Great, thank you.
I think, put the money to one side. The most important thing is to be talking about it. Go back to the data, because if you can get access to the information, that's really helpful. Transparency of that, so it shouldn't be hidden away, it should be opened up, talked about, debated, understand where we could do things differently. That doesn't cost the same sort of money as having a budget to run events, etc. And draw on your network, said today. And then the other thing I'd say is, again, to Paul, thank you very much, purposeful leadership. So somebody who really cares, that has more of a powerful impact than spending any money on anything. So having that leader who demonstrates that purpose and takes people with them will have a huge impact on the organisation.
Brilliant, thank you so much. So we've had over 36 questions come through, so do thank you all for submitting those. Our panellists are going to be around, should you wish to grab them over lunch and continue the conversation, but I hope you found this panel really useful, I know I have, so can you thank me?